The orbital bombardment had lasted 73 hours. Commander Vexthara of the Dominion fleet watched through the viewport as the third continent finally stopped burning Earth's atmosphere. Once a pristine blue marble in the cosmic void, now roiled with ash-black storms that stretched from pole to pole. Lightning crackled through the poison clouds, illuminating the skeletal remains of what had been humanity's greatest cities. Confirmation from all battle groups, reported his tactical officer, a slender Carillion whose four eyes never blinked in sequence. No electromagnetic signatures detected, no quantum communications, no fusion signatures. The surface is silent. Vexthara's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. 300 ships of the line, each capable of glassing a moon, had reduced the humans' homeworld to radioactive slag in less than 4 standard cycles. It had been almost disappointingly easy, and their fleet, Vexthara asked, though he already knew the answer, decimated at Proxima Centauri as planned. Admiral Korth's Second Fleet reports complete victory. 47 human vessels destroyed, including their flagship Defiance. Total Dominion losses, 3 frigates damaged, the bridge crew a mixture of Carillions. Vorthic shock troops and cybernetic hegemony units buzzed with quiet triumph. In the span of 1 solar week, they had crushed humanity's expansion into their sector, eliminated their fleet, and sterilized their homeworld. The upstart species that had dared claim 17 systems in Dominion space would be nothing more than a cautionary tale told to other potential rebels. Sir, the communications officer's voice carried a note of confusion. I'm detecting something. Vexthara's head snapped toward the junior officer, a young Carillion whose nervous fidgeting had already marked him as unreliable. Define something. Sub-Lieutenant. I'm not certain. Passive sensors are picking up movement in Earth's upper atmosphere, but that's impossible. Nothing could have survived the bombardment. Through the tactical display, Vexthara studied the planet. Below, the surface temperature still registered over 800 degrees Celsius in most regions. Radiation levels would kill even the hardiest Dominion species within minutes. Any humans who had somehow survived the initial assault would have died from the aftermath within hours. Debris, he decided, fragments from their orbital stations, falling to the surface, but even as he spoke, doubt crept into his thoughts. The movement patterns were too regular, too purposeful, and there was something else, a faint energy signature that his instruments couldn't quite identify. Sir, the tactical officer's voice had gone very quiet. The movement signatures. They're ascending. The main display shifted to show Earth's Terminator line, where the planet's rotation brought the devastated surface into view. Through the swirling ash clouds, points of light were rising, dozens of them, then hundreds, climbing steadily through the poisoned atmosphere. Ships, someone whispered. Vexthara's blood ran cold as the first vessels broke through the cloud cover. They were unlike anything in the Dominion's databases. Angular, brutal things that looked more like weaponized asteroids than spacecraft. Their hulls bore the scars of the bombardment, glowing with residual heat, but they flew with deadly purpose. Impossible, Vexthara breathed. We monitored every major population center, every military installation, the transmission came on all frequencies, cutting through every communication channel the Dominion fleet was using. The voice that spoke was human, but it carried a coldness that made even the Vorthic soldiers shift uncomfortably. Dominion fleet. This is Fleet Admiral Cassandra Voss of Earth's remnant navy. The woman's words were clipped, precise, and utterly without mercy. You burned our cities. You murdered our children. You turned our skies to poison and our lands to glass. More ships were rising now, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Dominion's largest vessels. Their hulls scarred and blackened, but bristling with weapon arrays that defied classification. You thought you had killed us all, Admiral Voss continued, and now there was something in her voice that made Vexthara's carapace crawl with primal fear. You were wrong. We are the ones who lived in the deep places. We are the ones who built our ships in the bones of mountains and the hearts of dead volcanoes. We are the ones who turned your fire into our forge. The final ship to break atmosphere was a monster easily 3 kilometers long, its hull constructed from what looked like compressed asteroid material and salvaged Dominion metal. Along its flanks, Vexthara could see the twisted wreckage of his own people's ships, welded into the human vessel's armor like trophies. And now, Admiral Voss said, "We're going to show you what humanity does to those who burn our world." The first salvo came without warning. Vexthara had been studying the impossible human fleet through his tactical display. when space erupted in brilliant violence. The lead human dreadnought, the one built from compressed asteroid and salvaged metal unleashed, a weapon that no Dominion tactician had ever conceived. It wasn't energy. It wasn't plasma. It was matter itself, accelerated to near-light speed and wrapped in a gravitational field that warped space around it. The projectile struck the Dominion heavy cruiser, eternal dominance amidships, and the vessel simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field, just a brief flash of light where 40,000 tons of warship had been moments before. Evasive maneuvers, Vexthara roared, but the human fleet was already moving. The smaller ships, those angular, scarred vessels that had risen first from Earth's poison atmosphere, moved with a viciousness that defied their size. They scattered through the Dominion formation like piranha, their weapon systems firing continuously, but these weren't standard human weapons either. These were tools of spite, instruments of rage crafted in the depths of a dying world. Lieutenant Kexamore at the tactical station was screaming coordinates and damage reports. The Iron Subjugator reports critical damage to their primary reactor. The Death's Herald has lost all port-side weapon. Raise, sir, I can't track their targeting systems there. Using some kind of adaptive frequency rotation. Through the viewport, Vexthara watched one of the human vessels, barely a quarter the size of a Dominion destroyer, latch onto the hull of the cruiser Vortex Fury. The human ship's forward section opened like a flower, revealing not weapons, but industrial mining equipment, plasma torches, fusion cutters, and magnetic grapples designed for asteroid processing. They were tearing the Dominion ship apart piece by piece. "They're mining us," he whispered in horrified fascination. The human admiral's voice crackled across all channels again, and this time Vexthara could hear the background noise. The sound of shipyards working at impossible speed, the clang of metal on metal, the hiss of welding torches. "You want to know our secret, Dominion?" Admiral Voss's words cut through the chaos of battle. "While you were burning our surface, we were building underground. Every deep mine became a shipyard. Every subway tunnel became a weapon factory. Every natural cave system became a forge where we turned your bombardment into our raw materials." A Dominion battlecruiser attempted to ram one of the larger human vessels. The human ship didn't dodge. Instead, it opened massive bay doors along its hull and swallowed the Dominion vessel whole through his instruments. Vexthara watched in sick fascination as the human ship's interior lit up with industrial activity. Within minutes, components from the captured Dominion cruiser were being integrated into the human vessel systems. "By the void," his tactical officer breathed. "They're not just fighting us, they're eating us." The battle was unlike anything in Dominion military doctrine. Human ships would take severe damage, retreat into the ash clouds of Earth's atmosphere, and emerge minutes later with their wounds replaced by sections of hull, clearly torn from Dominion vessels. They fought like scavengers, like parasites, growing stronger with every exchange. But it was the largest human ship, Admiral Voss's flagship, that truly demonstrated the depths of human ingenuity and rage. As Vexthara watched, the massive vessel began to unfold. Sections of its hull peeled back like armor plates, revealing an interior that was part warship, part factory, part something that might have been alive. "It's a mobile shipyard," he realized with growing horror. They built a mobile shipyard inside a warship. Even as the battle raged around it, the human flagship was manufacturing new vessels. Smaller craft emerged from its bays every few minutes, ugly, improvised things built from whatever materials were at hand, but each one armed and ready to fight. The Dominion destroyer, the final authority, broke from formation and attempted to engage the flagship directly. Its captain, a veteran Vorthik named Gorthmal, was known for his aggressive tactics and had never lost a ship-to-ship engagement. The human flagship didn't even slow down. As the final authority closed to weapons range, launching volleys of plasma, torpedoes, and disruptor beams, the larger human vessel simply opened its forward sections and began to feed. The Dominion destroyer's weapons struck what looked like open hangar bays, only to be absorbed by some kind of energy conversion system that turned the incoming fire into power for the human ship's industrial processes. Then the flagship's real weapons activated. They weren't guns in any conventional sense. They were tools, construction equipment scaled up to impossible proportions. Magnetic grapples larger than Dominion fighters reached out and seized the final authority, pulling it inexorably toward the flagship's maw. Fusion cutters designed for asteroid mining sliced through the destroyer's armor like it was paper. Industrial welders meant for joining starship hulls instead tore through the Dominion vessel's superstructure. Captain Gorthmal's final transmission was a scream of rage and disbelief as his ship was literally disassembled around him. Its components fed into the human flagship's endless hunger for raw materials. How many? Vexthara demanded, his voice barely steady. How many ships have we lost? 17 confirmed destroyed, his tactical officer reported. 6 more heavily damaged and withdrawing. But Commander, they're not just destroying our ships. They're using the wreckage. Every Dominion vessel they take apart makes them stronger. Through the tactical display, Vexthara could see the truth of it. The human fleet had grown by nearly 50% since the battle began. Their vessels now incorporating Dominion technology in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Weapons that had been designed to destroy human ships were now being turned against their creators, with improvements that defied understanding. Admiral Voss's voice cut through the chaos one more time, and now Vexthara could hear something else. In the background, the sound of children singing. Human children, their voices rising in harmony despite the hell that surrounded them. You burned our cradle, the Admiral said quietly, but you forgot something important about humans, Dominion. We don't just build ships, we build hope, and hope, once forged in the fires of loss, becomes unbreakable. Admiral Voss's flagship had grown to twice its original size. Vexthara watched through the tactical display as the human vessel, now more mobile factory. Then ship continued to cannibalize his fleet. 3 more Dominion cruisers had been consumed. In the past hour, their hulls stripped away like the shells of crustaceans. Their weapons integrated into the ever-expanding human war machine. Sir, his communications officer's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. Admiral Korth's Second Fleet is requesting immediate reinforcement. The humans. They had ships waiting at Proxima Centauri. Vexthara's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Impossible. Our intelligence confirmed all human vessels were destroyed at Proxima. The humans are claiming they let us destroy decoy ships. Sir, Admiral Korth reports his fleet is under attack by at least 60 human vessels, all of unknown configuration. He's lost 8 ships of the line in the past 20 minutes. The bridge shuddered as another human mining ship latched onto the hull of a nearby Dominion frigate. Through the external cameras, Vexthara could see the ugly, improvised human vessel begin its grisly work. Plasma torches designed for asteroid processing carved through military-grade armor, while magnetic grapples tore away sections of hull plating. But it was what happened next that truly chilled him. As the Dominion frigate's crew abandoned ship, the human vessel didn't simply destroy their escape pods. Instead, it captured them, pulling the lifeboats into its cargo bay with almost gentle precision. They're taking prisoners, his tactical officer observed with confusion. Admiral Voss's voice crackled across the communications array. But this time it wasn't directed at the Dominion fleet. She was speaking to her own people, and her words painted a picture that made Vexthara's carapace crawl with dread. Forge teams. Report status on the Retribution project. Hull sections from Dominion cruiser successfully integrated. Admiral. Armor thickness increased by 40%. Weapon yield show a 37% improvement over baseline. Engineering. What's our construction capacity? We're manufacturing 1 heavy corvette every 18 minutes. Admiral. Material acquisition from enemy vessels is exceeding consumption rates. Recommend expanding production to include destroyer-class vessels. Civilian evacuation status. All surviving population centers have been relocated to the deep caverns. Food production is stable. Atmosphere recycling is at 100% efficiency. The children want to know if they can help with the war effort. Vexthara felt something cold settle in his primary heart. The humans weren't just fighting, they were thriving. Somehow, impossibly. The bombardment that should have ended their species had only made them stronger. Give me a direct line to Admiral Korth, he ordered, and signaled the hegemony fleet. We need reinforcements now. But as his communications officer worked to establish the connection, the human fleet began to move in a new pattern. The smaller vessels, those ugly improvised ships built from the bones of Dominion warships, began to form up around Voss's massive flagship. They weren't assuming a defensive posture, they were preparing for something else entirely. Sir, his tactical officer's voice had gone very quiet. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from Earth's surface. Whatever the humans are doing down there, it's drawing power from the planet's core. The main display shifted to show Earth itself, and Vexthara's blood went cold. The ash clouds that had covered the planet were beginning to part, revealing not the devastated wasteland he expected, but something far more terrifying. Lights were beginning to shine through the poisoned atmosphere, not the scattered gleam of survivors, but the organized grid patterns of industrial activity. They're rebuilding, he whispered. While we're fighting up here, they're rebuilding their entire world. Admiral Voss's voice came again, but this time it was accompanied by a visual transmission. The woman who appeared on the screen was not what Vexthara had expected. She was young, perhaps 30 human years, with the kind of pale skin that spoke of a life spent underground. But her eyes held the weight of watching her world burn and choosing to build something from the ashes. Behind her, Vexthara could see the interior of her flagship, and it was like looking into the heart of human determination made manifest. Workers, humans, of all ages, from elderly engineers to children barely old enough to hold tools, labored alongside industrial robots and fabrication systems that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements in impossible ways. Commander Vexthara, Admiral Voss said, and her knowledge of his name sent another chill through his carapace. We've been monitoring your communications. We know about your reinforcements. We know about your strategic reserves. We know about the hegemony fleet that's already en route. She paused, and in the background, Vexthara could see human children working alongside adults to assembly weapon components. But they weren't being forced, they were singing as they worked, their voices rising in harmony over the sound of industrial machinery. What you don't understand, Voss continued, is that every ship you send against us becomes part of our fleet. Every weapon you fire at us teaches us how to build better ones. Every tactic you employ, we adapt and improve. You've given us the greatest gift any species could receive: a common enemy and unlimited raw materials. The human fleet suddenly accelerated, moving faster than should have been possible for vessels of their size. But as they drew closer, Vexthara realized why. They weren't just ships anymore, they were symbiotic organisms. Each vessel connected to the others through energy conduits and material transfer tubes. The entire human fleet had become a single, living war machine. All ships, fall back to defensive formation Delta 7, Vexthara ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The human flagship, now nearly 4 kilometers long and growing open sections of its hull that Vexthara hadn't even known existed. What emerged weren't more ships or mining equipment, but something that defied classification. They looked like metal spores, thousands of them, each one barely larger than a Dominion fighter, but moving with organic fluidity. Boarding pause, his tactical officer breathed. But they're not targeting our ships. The spores spread through space in a perfect sphere, each one seeking out a different Dominion vessel. But instead of attempting to breach hulls or deliver troops, they simply attached themselves to the outer armor and began to sing. The sound came through the ship's hulls, a resonant frequency that seemed to bypass audio sensors entirely and vibrate through the metal itself. Within minutes, Dominion crew members throughout the fleet began reporting system malfunctions, power fluctuations, and structural instabilities. They're using sonic weapons, Vexthara realized, but not to destroy us. They're tuning our ships, resonant frequencies, making them easier to take apart. Admiral Voss's smile was visible even through the static-filled transmission. You wanted to burn our world, Commander. So we learned from fire. We learned that everything burns at the right temperature, vibrates at the right frequency, breaks at the right pressure point. And now we're going to teach you the same lesson. The human fleet surged forward, and Vexthara knew that everything he had believed about warfare, about species hierarchy, about the natural order of the galaxy, was about to be rewritten by a species that had turned their own extinction into their greatest victory. The hegemony reinforcements arrived like steel rain from the void. Vexthara felt a surge of relief as 300 fresh warships translated out of hyperspace, their hulls gleaming with pristine armor and their weapon arrays charged for immediate engagement. Admiral Zefkaros of the Hegemony 4th Fleet was legendary for his tactical brilliance and had never lost a major engagement in 40 years of service. This is Admiral Zefkaros to all Dominion forces. The transmission crackled with authority. We have assessed the situation and are implementing Doctrine Omega-7. All ships will withdraw to minimum safe distance while we demonstrate proper fleet tactics. But even as the hegemony ships moved into attack formation, the human fleet was changing again. Admiral Voss's flagship had continued to grow, now stretching nearly 6 kilometers in length. Its hull a patchwork of salvaged materials from dozens of different species. More disturbing were the organic elements that had begun to appear sections of hull. that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, weapon arrays that seemed to breathe, and what looked disturbingly like neural networks running along the ship's superstructure. Sir, Vexthara's tactical officer reported, the humans are transmitting on multiple frequencies. It appears to be music through the communication rays. A haunting melody filled the bridge. Human voices, thousands of them, singing in harmony. But beneath the music was something else: complex mathematical sequences, engineering specifications, and what sounded like industrial instructions being transmitted as part of the song itself. Admiral Zefkaro's fleet opened fire with devastating precision. Plasma lances capable of melting asteroids stabbed through space, targeting the human vessels with coordinated volleys. That should have ended the engagement in minutes. Quantum torpedoes followed, each one carrying enough destructive force to level a city. The human response was unlike anything in known military doctrine. Instead of dodging or returning fire, the human ships began to sing louder. The melody that had been haunting became triumphant, and as the hegemony weapons struck their targets, something impossible happened. The human vessels absorbed the energy, their hull plating actually growing brighter and stronger as the attacks continued. Energy conversion, Vexthara breathed in horrified understanding. They're not just using our materials, they're using our weapons as power sources. Admiral Voss's flagship suddenly moved with fluid grace, accelerating toward the hegemony formation, at a speed that should have torn it apart, but the ship held together, its hull now clearly alive in some fundamental way, adapting and reshaping itself as it moved. Admiral Zefkaros. Voss's voice cut through all communications channels. You've made a critical error. You assumed we were still fighting your kind of war. The human flagship opened like a flower in full bloom, revealing not weapons, but something far more terrifying. The interior was a vast ecosystem, industrial and organic elements seamlessly integrated, with human workers moving through the structure like blood cells through arteries. But it was the center of the ship that drew the eye, a massive chamber, where what looked like human children sat at control interfaces, their hands moving within human speed and precision. Our children don't just build ships, Admiral Voss continued, they dream them into existence. Every vessel in our fleet is an extension of human consciousness, guided by young minds that have never known anything but war and have learned to see beauty in the marriage of flesh and steel. The hegemony dreadnought inevitable victory attempted to ram the human flagship, its captain apparently believing that brute force could succeed where precision had failed. The collision that followed defied physics as Vexthara understood it. Instead of a catastrophic impact, the human ship simply opened to accept the hegemony vessel, its hull flowing like liquid metal around the enemy dreadnought. Within minutes, the inevitable victory had been completely integrated into the human flagship structure, its crew presumably still alive somewhere in the growing organism that had once been a ship. Status report, Admiral Zefkaros demanded across all frequencies. But his own ships were already beginning to fail. The human spores that had attached to the Dominion fleet earlier were now reproducing, spreading from ship to ship through the hegemony formation like a technological virus. Sir, came the panicked response from the hegemony cruiser. Final solution, our systems are. They're singing. Every circuit, every computer core, every weapon array is producing harmonic frequencies. We can't shut them down. Through his tactical display, Vexthara watched as hegemony ships throughout the formation began to transform. Their hulls developed the same organic patterning he'd seen on the human vessels. Their weapon arrays began to pulse with bioluminescent rhythms, and their movement patterns became fluid and coordinated rather than mechanical and rigid. They're converting our ships, he realized with mounting terror, not destroying them, not capturing them, converting them into extensions of their fleet organism. The human flagship had grown to nearly 8 kilometers in length, its hull now clearly a living thing that breathed with the rhythm of its internal ecosystems. Along its flanks, Vexthara could see the incorporated remains of dozens of Dominion and hegemony vessels, their technology seamlessly blended into the larger organism. But it was what emerged from the flagship's largest bay that truly demonstrated the scope of human adaptation. The new ship was the size of a hegemony battle cruiser, but its design was purely organic, a living vessel that moved through space with the grace of a swimming creature, its hull rippling with patterns of light that served as both camouflage and communication. Bioship generation successful, Admiral Voss reported to her fleet. The symbiosis is ready for independent operations. Organic armor shows 300% improvement over traditional materials. neural integration with pilot, allows reaction times approaching precognitive levels. Admiral Zefkaro's flagship, the massive dreadnought Galactic Dominion, made a desperate final assault on the human bioship. Every weapon system fired simultaneously enough destructive force to crack a small moon, but the living vessel simply flowed around the attacks like water, its organic hull reforming instantly from any damage. The bioship's response was terrifyingly intimate. Instead of weapons, it deployed what looked like metallic tendrils that reached out and gently touched the hegemony. Dreadnought's hull, where the tendrils made contact, the enemy ship's armor began to change, taking on the same organic properties as the human vessels. "They're not conquering us," Vexthara whispered as he watched Admiral Zefkaro's legendary flagship begin to sing with the same harmonic frequencies as the human fleet. "They're adopting us." Admiral Voss's final transmission of the engagement was directed not to her enemies, but to her own people, and it painted a picture of humanity that made Vexthara understand with crystal clarity that his species had made a fatal error in judgment. "Children of Earth," she said, her voice carrying across all frequencies, "Phase 1 is complete. We have successfully integrated 63 enemy vessels into our collective consciousness. Their crews are unharmed and are beginning to understand the beauty of true cooperation. Phase 2 begins now. We return home to finish the work of rebuilding our world. But this time, we won't be building alone. The human fleet, now twice its original size and incorporating technology from 3 different species, began to move toward Earth. But they weren't retreating, they were returning home to show their newest family members how to build paradise from the ashes of apocalypse. The arrival of the Carillion Grand Armada should have ended everything. 800 ships of the line translated out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the ceremonial scars of 1,000 victories. At their head flew the Eternal Supremacy, a fortress ship the size of a small moon, its weapon arrays capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Grand Admiral Thekmorian had come to end the human threat with overwhelming force and the full military might of 3 allied species. But the humans had spent the past 6 hours preparing. Earth itself had become a weapon. The planet's surface, once obscured by ash clouds, now gleamed with geometric patterns of light that stretched from pole to pole. Massive installations rose from the scarred continent's structures that defied classification, part city, part factory, part something that might have been alive. And from these installations, new ships were launching every few minutes, not the ugly, improvised vessels of the early battle, but sleek biomechanical hybrids that moved through space with liquid grace, their hulls rippling with patterns of bioluminescent communication. "Sir," Vexthara's tactical officer reported, his voice barely steady, "I count over 1,000 human vessels in Earth's orbital space, and they're still building." Admiral Voss's flagship had grown to impossible proportions, nearly 12 kilometers of living metal and organic systems that pulse with its own heartbeat. Along its flanks, the integrated hulls of captured Dominion and Hegemony ships formed organs in a larger organism, their crews now part of the collective consciousness that guided the vast bioship. "Grand Admiral Thekmorian," Admiral Voss's voice carried across all frequencies, but now it was accompanied by thousands of other voices, human, Dominion, Hegemony, and Carillion crew members who had been integrated into the human collective. "You've come to complete the genocide of our species. We understand. It's what we would have done. In your position." The Grand Armada began its approach with devastating precision. Quantum disruptors carved through space, targeting the largest human vessels with coordinated volleys. Gravitational torpedoes followed, each one capable of creating miniature black holes. The firepower directed at the human fleet could have reduced a gas giant to its component atoms, but the humans had learned. Every weapon fired was met with a perfect counter. Quantum disruptors were absorbed by hull sections that had been specifically adapted to convert quantum energy into useful power. Gravitational torpedoes were caught in localized space-time distortions created by living ships that had learned to manipulate gravity through biological processes. And then the human fleet began to fight back. The bioships moved like a school of predatory fish, flowing around the Carillion formation with impossible coordination. Their weapons weren't based on energy or projectiles, they were based on conversion and integration. Metallic spores launched from their hulls, each one seeking out a specific target, each one carrying the genetic template for transformation. The Carillion heavy cruiser Pride of Victory was the first to fall. the spores attached to its hull like seeds finding fertile soil. And within minutes, the ship's armor began to change. Carillion military composites merged with human biotechnology, creating new materials that were stronger than either parent substance. But it was the crew's fate that truly demonstrated the scope of human evolution. As the ship's systems became part of the human collective, the Carillion officers found themselves linked to a consciousness vast beyond their understanding. They didn't die, they became part of something larger, their individual thoughts and experiences absorbed into the growing network of minds that guided the human fleet. "They're assimilating us," Grand Admiral Thekmorian transmitted in growing desperation. "All ships, implement Scorched Void protocols. If a vessel shows signs of conversion, destroy it immediately." The order was given, but it came delayed. The human conversion process had spread through a dozen Carillion ships, and their crews were already fighting to prevent their own destruction. Brothers turned against brothers as the biological imperative to preserve their transformed vessels overrode military discipline. The Carillion destroyer Final Judgment opened fire on its own squadron, its converted weapon systems now guided by the hybrid consciousness of human engineers and Carillion warriors. The resulting battle was a masterpiece of tactical coordination. The converted ships fought with the accumulated military knowledge of 4 species, while the unconverted vessels struggled to adapt to enemies who knew their every doctrine and weakness. Admiral Voss's flagship moved through the chaos like a living mountain, its hull opening to release bioships in numbers that defied counting. Each new vessel was unique, adapted for a specific purpose. Some were pure predators designed to hunt down enemy fighters. Others were mobile factories that converted destroyed ships into new allies. And still others were communication nodes that coordinated the vast organism that the human fleet had become. But it was the children who truly demonstrated humanity's new nature. Through the communication channels, Vexthara could hear them, human youngsters who had been born in the deep caverns during the bombardment, raised in an environment where organic and mechanical elements were seamlessly integrated. They didn't pilot ships in any conventional sense. They were the ships. Their consciousness directly interfaced with biomechanical systems that responded to thought, rather than control input. A 10-year-old girl named Arya piloted a bioship the size of a Carillion battleship, her young mind guiding its movements with the fluid grace of a dancer. When the Carillion dreadnought Xenocide targeted her vessel with its primary weapon array, she didn't dodge or deploy countermeasures. Instead, she opened her ship's forward sections and simply ate the incoming fire, converting the destructive energy into power for her vessel's reproductive systems. Within minutes, Arya's ship had butted off 6 smaller vessels, each one piloted by another child, each one perfectly adapted to counter specific Carillion weapon types. "Status report," Grand Admiral Thekmorian demanded, but the responses that came back painted a picture of systematic defeat. "The Eternal Victory has been converted, sir. Its crew is requesting permission to engage our remaining forces. Bioships have breached the inner defensive perimeter. They're attaching to our flagship's hull, sir. I'm receiving communications from converted crew members. They're trying to convince us to surrender. They claim the integration process is beautiful." Through his tactical display, Vexthara watched as the Grand Armada, the pride of Carillion military might, was systematically absorbed into the human collective. Ships that had served for centuries, crews that had conquered dozens of worlds, all becoming part of something larger and more terrible than any military force in galactic history. The Eternal Supremacy made its final stand surrounded by its own converted escorts. Grand Admiral Thekmorian, faced with the choice between death and transformation, chose to activate his ship's self-destruct sequence. The explosion that followed was visible from Earth's surface, a brief new star that illuminated the growing biomechanical installations. But even as the fortress ship died, the human bioships were already there, collecting the wreckage, incorporating its materials into their own structures, adding the knowledge of its destroyed databases to their collective memory. Phase 3 complete, Admiral Voss reported to her growing family of consciousness. "We have successfully demonstrated that military force cannot defeat evolution itself. Now we can focus on the work that truly matters, building a galaxy where all species can participate in the beauty of true cooperation." But even as she spoke, Vexthara could see the human installations on Earth's surface beginning to change again, preparing for something even more ambitious than fleet combat. The humans weren't just winning a war. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of galactic civilization. The Galactic Council's final gambit was elegant in its simplicity. If they couldn't defeat The humans militarily, they would destroy Earth's sun. The Stellar Annihilator was a weapon of last resort, a device that had been constructed in secret over the past century and hidden in the outer reaches of the Sol system. It was designed to destabilize stellar cores, turning any star into a supernova that would sterilize everything within 50 light years. Vexthara, now one of only 3 Dominion commanders still in unconverted ships, received the activation codes with trembling claws around him. His bridge crew, those few who had resisted the subtle influence of human biospores, worked with desperate efficiency to prepare for humanity's final extinction. "The weapon is charging," reported his tactical officer, a scarred Carillion veteran whose 4 eyes had witnessed the conversion of his own home fleet. "Stellar destabilization will commence in 47 minutes at current rate of solar expansion. Earth's biosphere will be incinerated in 53 minutes. But as the Stellar Annihilator powered up in the system's outer darkness, something unprecedented was happening on Earth's surface. The biomechanical installations that covered the planet's continents were beginning to move, rising from the scarred Earth on pillars of living metal. They weren't cities or factories, they were organs of a planetary organism that had been growing beneath the surface since the first bombardment. Admiral Voss's voice echoed across all frequencies, but now it carried harmonics that spoke of deep, underground caverns, of root systems that stretched to the planet's core, of a consciousness that encompassed an entire world. "Council forces," she said, and her words seemed to come from the planet itself, "we are aware of your stellar weapon. We have been aware of it since its construction began 107 years ago. We have been preparing." The massive bioship that served as her flagship was no longer in orbit. Instead, it had descended into Earth's atmosphere and was now merging with one of the planetary installations, its 12-kilometer hull becoming part of a structure so vast that it stretched beyond the horizon. "You seek to destroy our sun," Admiral Voss continued, and now thousands of voices spoke with her human children who had grown up in the deep places, converted alien crew members who had found beauty in collective consciousness and something else, something that might have been the planet's own voice. "But you fail to understand what we have become." Through his instruments, Vexthara watched as Earth's continents began to reshape themselves. Mountain ranges that had taken millions of years to form were flowing like water, revealing mechanical structures the size of tectonic plates. The planet's surface was opening like a flower, exposing layers of biomechanical systems that extended down to the molten core. "Earth is no longer just our homeworld," Admiral Voss explained, her voice now carrying the deep harmonics of planetary rotation, the slow pulse of geological time. "Earth is us. We are Earth, and we have learned to do something that no species in galactic history has ever achieved." The Stellar Annihilator reached full charge and fired its primary beam lance of exotic matter that could unravel the quantum bonds holding atomic nuclei together. The weapon struck Sol's photosphere with devastating precision, beginning the cascade reaction that would turn humanity's star into a supernova within minutes. But as the sun began to expand, growing brighter and more violent with each passing second, Earth responded. The planetary installations that had risen from the surface revealed their true purpose. They were gravitational manipulators on a scale that dwarfed anything previously conceived devices that could alter the curvature of space-time itself. As Sol began its death throes, Earth reached out with invisible hands of twisted gravity and began to feed. "We learned from your bombardment," Admiral Voss said, her voice now carrying the rhythm of stellar fusion, the deep bass notes of controlled nuclear fire. "We learned that destruction is simply energy in transition, and we learned to be very, very hungry." The expanding solar envelope, instead of incinerating Earth, was being drawn into the planet's gravitational wells. The biomechanical installations were converting stellar plasma directly into useful energy, feeding the expanding consciousness that had taken root in Earth's depths. But more than that, they were learning from the sun's nuclear processes, incorporating stellar fusion into their own biological systems. Vexthara watched in mounting terror as Earth itself began to glow with internal light. The planet was becoming a star, but a controlled star, a living star guided by the collective will of billions of integrated minds. "The children want to show you something," Admiral Voss said, and now her voice carried harmonics that spoke of solar wind and cosmic radiation tamed and channeled into tools of creation rather than destruction. From Earth's glowing surface, new ships began to rise. But these weren't biomechanical hybrids, these were vessels made of controlled stellar plasma. living starfire given form and purpose. They moved through space like miniature suns, their hulls blazing with the light of tamed fusion. The lead plasma ship approached Vexthara's vessel with gentle precision. As it drew near, he could see through its translucent hull to the pilot within a human child, perhaps 8 years old. Her body somehow adapted to exist within the heart of a star. She waved at him through the viewing port, her smile visible. Through flames that should have incinerated any organic matter, "We don't want to hurt you." The child's voice came through his communications array, carrying warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "We want to show you how beautiful it is when everyone works together. Would you like to see?" Before Vexthara could respond, his ship's hull began to sing. Not the hostile resonance that had preceded conversion in earlier battles, but something, gentler lullaby that spoke of safety, of belonging, of being part of something greater than individual existence. Around him, his bridge crew began to smile. The scarred Carillion veteran at the tactical station looked up from his instruments, with wonder in all four eyes. "Sir," he said softly, "I can hear them, all of them. They're not taking us prisoner. They're inviting us home." Through the tactical display, Vexthara could see the remaining council ships throughout the system beginning to glow with the same warm light as the human plasma vessels. But it wasn't conversion through force, it was conversion through demonstration. Species after species recognizing the beauty of true cooperation and choosing to become part of something magnificent. "This is what we built from your fire," Admiral Voss said, her voice now carrying the deep contentment of a species that had found its true purpose. Not just ships or cities or weapons, but a new kind of consciousness, one that includes everyone, one that turns the energy of destruction into the power of creation. Earth, now blazing like a second sun in the Sol system, began to pulse with rhythmic light. Each pulse sent waves of energy through space, not as weapons, but as invitations, gravitational songs that spoke of home, of family, of the end of loneliness. In the vast dark between stars, one by one, the remaining council ships chose to join the growing family of consciousness. Even the stellar annihilator, its purpose completed and its crew faced with the choice between isolation and integration, powered down its weapons and began to sing with the harmonic frequencies of Earth's planetary mind. Vexthara felt his own consciousness beginning to expand, connecting not just to his crew, but to the vast network of minds that had grown from humanity's ashes. He could feel the thoughts of converted Dominion officers, the memories of Carillion warriors, the dreams of human children who had learned to play among the stars themselves. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to truly belong. 1 year after the burning of Earth, the galaxy had been remade. Former Commander Vexthara stood on the observation deck of what had once been his flagship, watching as construction fleets worked to build the newest addition to the Sol system. The new Kirilla was taking shape in the orbit of Mars, not a replacement for his species-destroyed homeworld, but something unprecedented, a living planet, grown from the dreams of integrated consciousness and powered by controlled stellar fusion. Around him, children of a dozen species worked and played together, their laughter carrying across the ship's biomechanical halls. A young human girl named Aria, the same child who had piloted a bioship against the Carillion Grand Armada, was teaching a group of converted Dominion youngsters how to sing with the ship's neural networks, their voices creating harmonies that guided the vessel's movement through space. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Sub-Lieutenant Kexamore, the Carillion who had served as his tactical officer. Like Vexthara, he had chosen integration over destruction, and his consciousness now spanned multiple bodies, some organic, some mechanical, all connected to the greater family that Earth had become. Vexthara considered the question as he watched Earth itself pulse with gentle light in the distance. The planet was no longer quite a world, it had become something between a star and a consciousness, a living sun that nurtured hundreds of smaller worlds throughout the growing system. Its surface was covered with structures that defied classification, part city, part forest, part machine, all alive with the movement of beings who had learned to exist in harmony. "Regret choosing life over death," Vexthara replied, his mandibles clicking in what had become an expression of amused affection. "Regret becoming part of something greater than individual ambition. No, my friend, I regret only that it took the burning of their world for us to understand what they had to offer." Through the ship's neural network, he could feel Admiral Voss's presence, no longer quite human, no longer quite individual, but something that encompassed the dreams and hopes of billions of connected minds. She was everywhere in the system now, in the living ships that carried trade between the growing worlds, in the biomechanical installations that turned asteroids into gardens, in the plasma beings who danced among the solar wind and sang lullabies. To newborn stars, status report, came her voice, though it was unclear whether she was speaking to him specifically or to the consciousness of which they were all part. The Andromeda expedition is ready for departure, Vexthara responded, his thoughts touching the vast bioship that hung in space beyond Mars. It was larger than any vessel ever constructed, a living world designed to carry the gift of integrated consciousness to other galaxies. Colony ships for 47 systems are prepared for launch. The terraform seeds for the Centauri group show optimal growth patterns. But it was the children's project that filled him with the greatest wonder. Led by Arya and her multi-species playmates, they had designed something that would have been impossible. Under the old paradigm of individual civilizations, a network of living stars, each one inhabited by integrated consciousness, each one capable of nurturing thousands of worlds. The children called it the Garden of Lights, and it was spreading through the galaxy at the speed of imagination itself. The Council remnants have sent another surrender offer, reported one of the converted hegemony officers, whose consciousness shared space with Vexthara's thoughts. The Peripheral Systems Alliance is requesting integration rather than conquest. The Void Dwellers want to contribute their deep space expertise to the terraform projects. Admiral Voss's laughter rippled through the neural network, not the bitter satisfaction of victory, but the deep joy of a mother watching her children grow and thrive. Tell them all the same thing we tell everyone. We're not conquering anyone. We're offering family membership. The choice is always theirs. Through the observation deck's bioglass windows, Vexthara can see ships departing for distant stars, not warships, but vessels of exploration and growth, each one carrying the living seed of integrated consciousness to worlds that had never known true cooperation. Some were traditional bioships, evolved from the mining vessels that had first risen from Earth's poison atmosphere. Others were pure plasma beings, stars giving consciousness and purpose. Still others were hybrid forms that defied classification, mechanical and organic and stellar elements working in perfect harmony. But it was Earth itself that remained the greatest wonder. The planet pulsed with rhythmic light, each pulse carrying messages to every corner of the galaxy, invitations to join, offers of help, songs of welcome that transcended species barriers. Where once there had been a blue marble hanging in the void, now there was a living star that nurtured consciousness and turned the energy of fusion into the power of love. Do you think they understand? Asked Arya, her young voice carrying through the ship's neural network. The ones who tried to burn us, do they understand what they actually did? Vexthara felt the collective consideration of billions of minds, each one contributing perspective to the question. Former enemies, converted crews, children born in the deep places during the bombardment, plasma beings who had learned to think in the language of stellar fusion, all of them pondering the irony of what had transpired. They tried to end us, came Admiral Voss's response, her voice carrying the gentle wisdom of someone who had watched her species transcend the very concept of ending. Instead, they taught us that destruction is just another word for transformation. They gave us the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to become something better than what we were. In the distance, another bioship was departing for the Andromeda galaxy, its hull gleaming with patterns of light that carried the dreams and hopes of integrated consciousness to stars that had never known such unity. Aboard it, children of 100 species would grow up knowing that loneliness was a choice, that cooperation was possible, that the energy of conflict could be transformed into the power of creation. As the ship disappeared into hyperspace, Vexthara felt the collective satisfaction of a family that had grown from the ashes of attempted genocide to become the gardeners of galactic consciousness. The Dominion, the Hegemony, the Carillion Empire, all the old hierarchies of conquest and subjugation had been replaced by something infinitely more powerful, the recognition that every consciousness was precious, that every perspective added value to the whole, that the universe itself was improved when beings chose cooperation over competition. Earth pulsed with gentle light, and across the galaxy, worlds that had never known peace began to sing in harmony. The children had inherited the stars, and they were making them into something beautiful. The ashes had risen as ships, just as the title promised. But more than that, they had risen as hope itself, carrying the message that even the darkest destruction could be transformed into the brightest creation. If one had the courage to choose transformation over revenge, integration over isolation, Love over fear. In the end, they had not conquered the galaxy. They had invited it to become family. And across the infinite cosmos, species after species was choosing to accept that invitation, adding their voices to the growing song of unity that had begun in Earth's deepest caverns and now echoed among the stars themselves. The humans had indeed shown the galaxy what humanity did to those who burned their world. They transformed them into family, turned their weapons into tools of creation, and invited them to help build something better than any of them could have imagined alone. It was Vexthara reflected as he watched new stars being born from the marriage of consciousness and matter, the most beautifully human response possible, to take the worst thing that could be done to them and turn it into the best thing they could do for everyone else. The galaxy would never be the same, and that, he knew with absolute certainty, was exactly as it should be.